Saima Saleem. I'm Counsellor at the Permanent Mission of Pakistan to the United Nations. I will be moderating today's event. Excellencies, panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Pakistan to the United Nations and Muslim American Leadership Alliance, it is an honor to welcome you to this high-level side event on Indus Water Treaty, Pakistan's water crisis, challenges, and the way forward. Water is not merely a resource, it is life itself. The Indus Water Treaty has long stood as an example of transboundary water management and cooperation, but today it faces challenges that strike at the heart of humanitarian well-being and regional stability. Today's discussion is not only about a treaty, it is also about the dignity of millions, the survival of future generations, the principles of peaceful coexistence, and upholding the sanctity of international law itself. Against this perspective, I have the honor to invite our keynote speaker, Ambassador Asim Iftikhar Ahmad, Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations, for his remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and very good afternoon to all of you, colleagues, excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to speak to you, a very distinguished gathering, I would say, gathered here on a very important topic. Water security has become one of the defining challenges of our times. For Pakistan, this is an existential reality impacting our economy, our society, and the very survival of our people. The Indus River system is the lifeline of Pakistan. Nearly 80% of our cultivated land depends on its waters, sustaining livelihoods and food production. The Indus Waters Treaty that was concluded in 1960 was a rare triumph of cooperation in a region that we know is often beset by divergences. For more than 6 decades, it has stood as a model of transboundary resource management, where the parties found common ground. Its durability was a testament to one of the most fundamental principles of international law, pacta sunt servanda. Agreements must be kept and observed in good faith. But colleagues, of late, this treaty is facing its gravest challenge. The Indian move to unilaterally hold it in abeyance has raised serious doubts about the sanctity of international commitments. It is a grave violation of international law, including international humanitarian law and human rights law. And let us be clear, the treaty remains legally intact. The Permanent Court of Arbitration, in its recent decisions of June and August 2025, reaffirmed the continuing validity of the treaty and its binding dispute resolution mechanisms. These rulings leave no ambiguity that no party has the authority to unilaterally suspend or abandon this agreement. The Indus Waters Treaty is alive and its provisions remain binding on the parties. I would like to touch on 2 key dimensions of this discussion. First, the consequences of undermining the treaty are extremely grave in terms of human suffering. The devastation caused by recent floods in Pakistan was compounded, for example, by the denial of timely data sharing, which is an obligation clearly enshrined in the Indus Waters Treaty. The absence of critical information turned a natural disaster into a humanitarian tragedy, costing lives, displacing families and eroding trust. This painful episode underscored what is at stake when such treaty obligations are disregarded. Ordinary people bear the brunt. Farmers who see their crops drowned, children left without homes, critical infrastructure destroyed. Water, especially in arid regions like ours, cannot be withheld or manipulated by the upper riparian without serious consequences for the lower riparians. It is a basic human right, the foundation of public health, food production, and human dignity. For a country of over 240 million people, uncertainty over water availability translates into depleted reservoirs, empty fields, shrinking harvests, diminished agricultural productivity, and deepened poverty. Water scarcity heightens vulnerabilities, particularly for women and children. The human cost of undermining the Indus Waters Treaty is therefore borne disproportionately by those least able to endure it. To treat water as an instrument of political leverage is to deny people their most fundamental human rights. Water must never be weaponized. This is Pakistan's position. Second dimension that I want to highlight is that beyond the humanitarian dimension, Indian actions carry grave implications for peace and security. The Indus Waters Treaty has long functioned as a stabilizing force in South Asia, insulating a vital resource from political tensions and conflict. Its weakening risks creating a new fault line in a region already marked by volatility. The UN Security Council has recognized the link between natural resource management and international peace and security. And nowhere is that link more evident than in the case of Indus Waters. And there is a bigger question here also for the wider international community. The danger does not end within Pakistan's borders. If an agreement as celebrated and as resilient as the Indus Waters Treaty can be held in abeyance, what message does that send to the rest of the world? That transboundary water agreements from Central Asia to Latin America, from Africa to Middle East, are only as durable as the whims of the parties? That solemn legal obligations can be paused at will? It would set a dangerous precedent, inviting instability in other fragile regions where shared rivers are the difference between harmony and conflict. Unraveling of Indus Waters Treaty would not only impact Pakistan, it would erode confidence in international law and send a wrong message far beyond our region. But despite these challenges, the path forward, in our view, is clear. The treaty endures and its mechanisms remain valid. Recent arbitral rulings have reaffirmed these facts. The treaty obligations must be respected. Cooperative water management is not a choice. It is a necessity for peace, security, survival, and shared prosperity. The Indus Waters Treaty is more than a legal document. It is a lifeline for millions, a guarantor of regional stability. To weaken it is to endanger the credibility of international agreements everywhere. And to uphold it is to affirm the primacy of law, the sanctity of treaties, and the dignity of humanity. Colleagues, participants, Pakistan remains steadfast in its commitment to the treaty and to the principles of equity and cooperation that underpin it. We trust that the international community will also stand with us in upholding these values for peace, for preservation of international legal order, and above all, humanity. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Asim, for those insightful keynote remarks that have laid down the foundation of our discussion today. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Maha Khan, Chairperson of Muslim American Leadership Alliance, for her welcome remarks. Maha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Saima. Good afternoon, distinguished panelists, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor to be with you today. On behalf of MALA, we warmly welcome you and extend heartfelt gratitude to the Permanent Mission of Pakistan to the United Nations under the leadership of His Excellency Ambassador Asim Iftikhar Ahmad for organizing this very important event in partnership with us. I also thank colleagues at the Permanent Mission of Pakistan, in particular our moderator, Ms. Saima Saleem, for facilitating and organizing this event. I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished panelists, Barrister Dawood Ghazanavi, Dr. Kishor Uprety, Dr. Masood Ahmad, and Attorney Shahmeer Halepota. Welcome to you all. Our collaboration with the Permanent Mission of Pakistan reflects our shared commitment to raising awareness and mobilizing action on this critical issue. For years, MALA has been active in advancing the 17 SDGs in both the United States and Pakistan, with a particular focus on gender equality, reducing inequalities, and building peaceful, just, and resilient institutions. Through over 250 in-person and virtual events, we have worked tirelessly to promote equity, justice, and social responsibility. With consultative status at ECOSOC, MALA engages in UN processes, including the Commission of the Status of Women and the General Assembly. Ensuring that diverse perspectives and innovative solutions are brought to the global stage. In partnership with UNICEF USA, we have developed integrated programs that safeguard the rights of women and children, and each year we continue to host CSW events, amplifying the underrepresented voices. As MALA UN NGO representative and chairwoman of the board, I reaffirm our commitment to social justice, ethical leadership, education, and service to the underserved. Our programs in Pakistan remain a cornerstone of this mission. At the same time, we are proud to serve as a platform for Muslim Americans, empowering them to embrace their heritage while confidently engaging in civic and political life. This year, we marked a historic milestone by leading efforts to recognize Muslim American Heritage Month in states including Illinois, New Jersey, Michigan, as well as Washington, D.C. We continue to highlight the rich contributions of Muslim Americans in medicine, sports, entrepreneurship, the arts, and public service, building bridges of pride and belonging. Our partnerships with institutions such as StoryCorps, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, along with support from foundations like Facebook, Cartier, and the Donnelly Foundation, strengthen our reach and impact. One of our proudest moments was ringing the NASDAQ opening bell on International Women's Day, a powerful symbol of recognition for our work to advance women's leadership and equality. In closing, I extend my deep appreciation to the Permanent Mission of Pakistan, Ambassador Ahmad, our distinguished panelists, and all of you present here today. Your insights and leadership will undoubtedly leave a lasting impact. Together, we can transform awareness into action and chart a path towards sustainable solution for Pakistan's water crisis and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maha, for MALA's commitment in bringing attention to this urgent issue with us. Dear colleagues, as you're well aware that Qatar was attacked by Israel, and right now we have emergency meeting of the Security Council which has just started to discuss the issue, and Ambassador Asim Iftikhar had to leave to make remarks at the emergency meeting which Pakistan together with Algeria and Somalia has co-sponsored, and as he is being now replaced by our Deputy Permanent Representative, Ambassador Usman Jadoon, who would be with us. Now we start our panel discussion. Allow me to introduce our speakers, each of whom bring unique expertise and perspectives to this critical conversation, and ask questions from them to enrich our discussion. Our first panelist is Dr. Kishor Uprety, a former senior legal advisor, Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, and former senior counsel, World Bank. Dr. Kishor, who holds a doctorate from Sorbonne University, Paris, worked as an international lawyer for over 35 years at IFAD, World Bank, and IIIB, among others. Throughout his career, he managed projects related transactions in more than 50 countries and led project teams in some of them. He also designed and implemented a variety of training programs on international development law and water and governance issues, and served on the editorial boards of World Bank Law, Justice and Development series and Brit's Research Perspective on International Water Law series. Dr. Kishor, who focuses broadly on journal international law, has authored 14 books which cover several thematic issues, including development, governance, and transboundary water management, including the Indus water regime. Dr. Kishor, kindly reflect on, for us, is holding in abeyance of Indus Water Treaty an imminent threat to peace and security in South Asia? You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, distinguished guests, panelists, excellencies. The answer to this very specific question is yes. Of course it is yes. The implications can be severe. I hope that the situation will improve soon. Let me begin my comments with a confession. Sorry. Like most lawyers focusing on international water law, I have always considered the Indus Treaty as one of the best examples, a remarkable framework for cooperation. It successfully regulates river sharing, infrastructure development, and implementation management through entities or through agencies such as the Permanent Indus Commission or dispute settlement, and His Excellency earlier mentioned those. It was indeed for me a surprise. It was a surprise to learn that the treaty was being suspended. There was a decision in April sometime about the suspension of the treaty or holding the treaty in abeyance, but from a legal perspective, I do not know what the differences are. It was really surprising because I had always understood that Indus Treaty was one of the treaties that could not be abrogated. That had no end. It could only be replaced. That was my understanding. As a result, I had to do some research and find out what the situation is and what was it like. So because of this confusion, I thought of exploring a bit to understand what general international law says and what treaty law says. And this is what I'm going to say very briefly, maybe in 10 minutes, share that with you today. Let's summarize. India's decision to suspend basically had two justifications. For a fundamental change in the circumstance since the treaty entered into force, and material breach of treaty obligations by Pakistan. These were the information included in the news item that we read. In support, there was also a reference to sustained cross-border terrorism, asserting that the ongoing hostilities had generated security concerns and had impaired the ability of India to fully utilize water entitlements. There was also reference to altered demographics, and there was also reference to the need to accelerate the development of clean energy. Two questions here need answering. whether the justifications meet the criteria of a fundamental change of circumstance under international law, and whether persistent cross-border terrorism and associated security concerns can be deemed as a material breach which justifies treaty suspension. And deriving from this is another question as to whether or not one party can unilaterally terminate the treaty. The two justifications need to be also examined against the rules of suspension recognized by international law. And to understand that, I think two principles need to be understood. The first principle is that of pacta sunt servanda, and His Excellency also already made allusion to that, therefore I will not go into it. But only thing is, from a legal perspective, without adherence to it, the treaty law would collapse, the international treaty law could collapse. That's there. And the second thing is the principle of rebus sic stantibus. And that allows, according to that principle, it is allowed to terminate a treaty when there is fundamental change of circumstance. And one of the reasons India had used to justify was this principle. Let me point out that there are three main criteria for rebus sic stantibus to hold. First is the unforeseen character of the change in the circumstance and fundamentality of change. Both these changes must have radically transformed the obligation imposed by the treaty. The second criterion is that the action must constitute an essential basis of consent to be bound by the treaty. And the third criterion is that the action should have altered the nature of the obligation in an essential way. I must add that regarding this, the International Court of Justice has precedents, and that it seems that no party can unilaterally abrogate its obligation on the vague basis of political change and social or environmental conditions. Thus, altered demography and need to accelerate the development of clean energy do not, in my view, seem to constitute a fundamental change of circumstance. And my analysis is purely legal, it is not based on any political issues. Let me now talk about the criteria for material breach test. The justification concerning the material breach test or treaty obligation is also linked with Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties. This is basic international law. Within the framework of general law of treaties, it aims at balancing two competing considerations. First is the need for effective response against treaty breaches, and the second one is the overarching interest in preserving treaty commitments. So there is this equilibrium is being attempted. And this balancing exercise has resulted in a complex regime characterized by four features. That the decision to make treaty-based response is dependent on a qualified material breach. Second is that the scope of the right to suspend treaties is restricted. That the treaties identifying states entitled to respond against a breach are categorized. And last, that the right to suspend treaties is subjected to procedural preconditions. Further, let me add that the suspension of treaties can only be sought in response to breaches of a material character. Remedies for immaterial breaches are not codified. For instance, the repudiation of a treaty generally constitutes a material breach, and any violation of a provision essential to the accomplishment of the purpose of the treaty qualifies as material. This also means that responses against serious breaches of treaty provisions that are not essential are not permitted. Conversely, a trivial breach of essential provision can constitute a material breach. And given the absence of clear normative guidance, the courts and tribunals have not been able to produce any comprehensive definition. They have merely restated the necessity of distinguishing between the normal and material breaches and have examined material breach in relation to the facts of each case. The Vienna Convention also elaborates upon conditions restricting the suspension of a treaty and regulates the scope of that right in a very basic fashion. 4 features stand out. First, the right of suspension is limited. Second, the discretion of states in choosing how to respond to material breach is limited. The responding party can only suspend the same treaty breached by the defaulting state. Suspension of other treaties is not justified. Third, the responding party have a discretion to choose whether to suspend the treaty in whole or in part. And fourth, certain provisions of treaties are considered as sacrosanct. They cannot be suspended at all, and these concern human rights related provisions. So clearly a party to a bilateral treaty can suspend, but if and when the other party commits a material breach. But the breach must concern the purpose of the treaty in question and no other unrelated concerns. And that unrelated concerns and the external political or security issues are unrelated concerns, particularly in the case of the Indus Treaty because it is related to river sharing, river water sharing. Based on the above, therefore, in the April decision to suspend, clear evidence justifying that substantive provisions of the treaty have been breached appears not convincing. There are some allegations of terrorism, and I will not go into that detail, but only from a legal perspective, they do fall outside the scope of the treaty and cannot be considered as a material breach. Also, the fact that the treaty has remained in force for years, during decades of hostile relations between the two countries, proves that the treaty can work without any problem. Now let me quickly talk about the treaty law itself, which is another aspect which is relevant for our discussion. I must note that the treaty does not include an exit clause. I'm talking about the Indus Treaty, and it does not include an exit clause. It does not specify any time limit and can only be replaced by another water treaty. It does not contain any explicit provision requiring good faith and peaceful relations, unlike many other water-related treaties that have been signed by different countries after the 1980s. Certainly from an international law perspective, we could consider that good faith is a general principle, but invoking it as a basis for suspension does not seem to be that convincing. And the treaty, lastly, does not include any provision regarding flood control. A revised treaty would probably take care of climate change and other environmental factors, and including altered demographics issues into consideration. But for that, negotiations have to happen between the two parties. Unilaterally, it would be difficult to do. Further, I must add that according to the treaty, the existence of any fact which is, if established, might constitute a breach of the treaty, first needs to be established by the Permanent Indus Commission. There is an obligation to go to the Permanent Indus Commission first. It also requires countries to use the dispute resolution mechanism before taking any action. And Excellency already talked about the dispute resolution mechanism. I will not talk about it, but just to share that this mechanism has been invoked many times. India, which was required to use this, has bypassed the process, undermining the legal validity of its claim under the Vienna Convention. This is purely legal analysis. and emphasizing this point is very important here because in all arbitral and judicial proceedings, failure to observe an available mechanism will can weigh heavily against any decision. So from the points above, in my view, maintaining the Indus Treaty with or without modifications appears to be a wiser decision, wiser option to avoid necessary costs for the parties. The treaty for Pakistan, His Excellency already mentioned earlier, is a matter of national security and economic survival, so uninterrupted flow of water is vital. Any change will be costly. It can also be costly for India because it could be politically and from a diplomatic angle there will be resistance and could become questionable under customary international law as well and the principle of pacta sunt servanda that we just talked about. And there will be cost for both countries. The repercussions could lead to imbalance between regional powers, scrutiny under international law, and damage to global standing and reputation, increased incidents of human rights, diplomatic backlash, more economic and military warfare, and this is for both countries. But now, in my view, it goes beyond. I want to emphasize that the effects of the decision is not limited. It transcends the two countries. The suspension will have a far-reaching consequence in the whole of South Asia, with potential side effects on the adherence to international law, and Excellency mentioned, resource management, diplomacy, and environmental and social security. It will really risk undermining a rare pillar of stability in an already divided region. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kishor, for explaining to us at length why it is important to adhere to the treaty, and under international law, including international customary law, it cannot be breached in such a manner. And this leads us to the idea that water must never be turned into a political weapon. Our next panelist is Dr. Masood Ahmad, a water expert. Dr. Masood Ahmad retired from the World Bank in 2017 and since then works as an independent advisor. He has over 37 years of experience in planning, design, and implementation of development programs in water resources, irrigation, hydropower, solar power, flood management, drainage systems, hydraulic structures, roads, bridges, infrastructure development, disaster management, restoration, recovery and control, environmental management, and policies relating to water resources. Ahmed, may I request your insight on, in the wake of Pakistan's water crisis, what would be the humanitarian implications of holding in abeyance of Indus Water Treaty and how to address them? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for arranging this event and giving this opportunity to discuss of what we have worked many years on the water issues and the treaties. I have worked on many treaties in Africa, Central Asia, Europe and others. Other than the legal aspect of the treaty, Indus Treaty is very unique in the respect that it has a huge technical analysis and understanding based on which the treaty has been made. In reality, the treaty was made by the engineers at that time, and it has about 8 years of dialogue and discussion in which both countries nominated their technical people to calculate almost everything over a 100-year period, because they have been working together, and the Indus system at one time was developed as a joint system. So it underpins a huge technical analysis, which is unlike many other treaties which you see in there, which are more of a legal nature. The second thing about this treaty is that its spirit was, it is taken a lot as a water sharing agreement, but in reality the main spirit was to further the development of the Indus Basin, which it did. The Indus Basin development started before the treaty. You know, the lot of canals both on East Punjab and West Punjab were developed prior to that, and up to 1930s, there was this water transfer which was taking place, which kind of stalled. So the issue, one hand was water sharing, but the secondly was how to continue the development in the Indus water resources. And all the technical people which discussed at that time saw that this is the arrangement by which the continued development of the Indus Basin can take place for the people who are living in that on both sides of that time border at that time. So there is third aspect of that is that unlike most treaties which are always in the books and rights, this has a physical footprint on the ground. The infrastructure was developed as a part of the treaty to make the treaty work on both sides of the border. There are dams and link canals and canals built on India's side, which enabled the better use of the water which were allocated that way, which is Ravi, Siyat and Basluj. Without that infrastructure development, they could not use that much water for that, and without the treaty, that infrastructure couldn't be developed. Same thing happened on the western side of the border, that Tarbela, Mangla, all that was developed, and that was not possible. So this treaty, when you talk about abeyance, it's not abeyance in a courtroom or in a paper. It has a footprint on there. And that footprint on the ground has to change anything in the treaty. That's what I want to emphasize a little bit. Because a lot of time people talk about the legal things. Now, the thing here is that the spirit was to continue the development of Indus waters, and that has not ended yet. That there is a technology changes which is happening where it can be done more efficiently. And if you don't have a arrangement in place, that continued development is not feasible. And that is already happening in terms of, we talked about solars, and we're doing floating solars on the reservoirs on both sides. Is happening. In India's side, there is on the canals, there's a floating solar. On Pakistan, in Tarbela, we are doing floating solars. So the new energy which is part of that work. And the main thing, the question is what to do if there's uncertainties. And that, I having done a lot of crisis projects in the world after the floods and everything, we have seen the societies which are resilient before, they recover faster. So the way to do is to have better water use system on the whole Indus Basin. I'm not talking this side or that side. If you have a better water system, you will be able to manage water back in the future, deal with the climate change issues, deal with other things. And the better water use in this case means, because in Indus Basin, in Indus system, more than 95% of water is used in irrigation. That's the main consumption of the water. So if you have a better irrigation system, you can have more productive society which can recover from the crisis which comes. There's a lot more to be done in storage in that. There's a lot more to be done on groundwater which can only be possible. The other challenge which is coming up, which has to be dealt some stage, is the pollution in the river systems and the withdrawal of the groundwater. And this all comes through more into the having certainties in what development projects will take place. At this time, it's very easy to deal with international funding entities and everything because you have a mechanism in place. I did a project on Indus and Dasu, and there was an Indus Commission. We didn't have to do anything. Indus Commission discussed with each other and informed each other, and the project was done in that manner. So the main way to deal with in future and make the system resilient is to bring in more resilient system, which means more productive irrigation and agriculture. More productive irrigation nowadays is going to drip irrigation, other things where water use is reducing completely, and hence this war on the white and shortage of water is reducing. So that all has to come into place. So I think I will stop there, and if there are questions about related to that, I'm happy to answer.
Dr. Masood, for your insightful remarks. Our next panelist is Barrister Dawood Ghazanavi. He is a distinguished public interest lawyer in Pakistan's High Court and Supreme Court, known for his bold advocacy at a very young age. Educated in United Kingdom and United States, he has argued landmark cases on voters' rights, prisoners' rights, and constitutional issues. He is also an accomplished author, with one of his books featured in the New York Times and Washington Post. He is also regularly speaks at think tanks and global forums. My question to you, Mr. Dawood, is what role can the United Nations system, World Bank, and civil society play in reinforcing the Indus Water Treaty's implementation and fostering regional peace? You have the floor.
Thank you, Saima. Thank you very much. And I really thank Mala and the Pakistani mission for organizing this important event. And before I explain that, what the World Bank and the UN and at the same time the civil society can do, I would like to express that what is happening in Pakistan right now on the ground. My hometown is in Sialkot, and when I had to come to America, I have to come to Islamabad. So during that way, you have to pass through Chenab River and Jhelum River. And when I was traveling on the 4th of September, I have seen a mass migration of people, hundreds of thousands of people, sitting on the roads and waiting for the next devastation coming their way. People were having their properties in their hands and their kids hanging on their cattles. So this was the situation I was witnessing. And I found this event so important to express the grievances, not only for the people of only living around Pakistan and India, but the people living across all those rivers. So that's a very huge humanitarian crisis. And like the other speakers, and especially the ambassador, have expressed that if India would have shared the hydrological data, which could have explained that how much water we are expecting from India during the season of floods, maybe we could have done more better arrangements. But because according to India, the treaty is in abeyance and suspended, so we only get the sight of a warning that the flood is coming. So that is one of the biggest violations I've seen on the side of the partner of the treaty, which they cannot suspend according to Dr. Uprety without the Geneva Convention Accord. So that's the basic of my talk. And when I talk about World Bank, so the question is what a World Bank can do. I mean, the World Bank itself is the originator of this treaty in 1960. And according to the data of the treaty, World Bank have a very limited role, having a procedural role, but at the same time, they have been a facilitator of the treaty. They have been the custodian, and at the same time, they have been the guarantor of the treaty, that both countries could share that water, which is a transboundary agreement. So in that sense, if I would see and remind what mediation the World Bank has done in the past between India and Pakistan. As we all know that in 2016, one of the biggest violations what happened was that India started building dam, Kishanganga Dam, on the Neelam River, on tributary of Jhelum Neelam River. And secondly was that the Rattle Dam. So Pakistan raised that issue in front of World Bank in 2016, and they asked for the Court of Arbitration to process and to find out the illegalities. But at the same time, India also reached out to the World Bank and they asked for the neutral expert. So both parties had a disagreement on that issue, and the World Bank, this is my personal opinion, they have engaged a lot of meetings between India and Pakistan. They have engaged a lot of discussions that what needs to be done. They paused that process. So for the 6 years, the process was being paused, and in these 6 years, India was allowed to make the dam, which was a Ganga Dam in 2018. And in 2022, it allowed both countries to follow their path. So this is how, and I've seen World Bank has played his part, and I still believe as a custodian and as a facilitator of the Indus Water Treaty, World Bank has to intervene back again, and they need to find and see from all those evidence the international atrocities, and the atrocity basically happened for the poor people. Now think about, Pakistan is an agrarian country still, and 85% of the water is coming from all those Indus Basin. So 45% of the people livelihood and people in the workforce are from the agriculture. So this all phenomena of suspending treaties and hurting Pakistan in that extent is such something which the World Bank need to consider, and they need to mediate back again into the same issue. So when I talk about to the United Nations now, interesting part is that we are sitting today in the United Nations, and I really believe that United Nations must be listening to us for this humanitarian crisis. And the biggest part is that Indus Water Treaty itself is registered in the United Nations in 1960, and India was the one which actually took up this treaty in United Nations to register it. So once the treaty has been registered in the United Nations, obviously the United Nations have their right to intervene in that process. So it's important to express and to tell what are the humanitarian conventions, resolutions, which are being violated by India because of suspending this treaty. So first thing when I come up to was the Vienna Convention, Article 54, which talks about not to use starvation as a weapon, starvation as a weapon for the people to use against the other country when the water itself is a human right resource. It's a fundamental right of people to have access to water. So this suspension goes towards starving people of Pakistan, and that has been evident from the speeches, not from the local level of leaders from India, but from the Prime Minister of India, the Home Minister of India, their Foreign Office. So this has been breached, the starvation clause of Vienna Convention. Secondly, if you see the United Nations Charter, Article 55 talks about human development. Water is a fundamental right. You cannot deprive people of water just because you have a political disagreements with the other country when you have a trans-border water treaties. So that's the other thing. And then I talk about the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights that do talk about the rights of people to have a safe access of drinking water. So that is one of the things which is being violated by India. And then we talk about the United Nations Watercourses Convention. It is even more clearer that when you have a treaty with the other country and you are sharing the water, you cannot stop the other country's water just because you have a protest on different issues. So this is one of the other violations which India has been doing on the basis of United Nations. So what Pakistan can do on two aspects in United Nations is, under Article 33 of UN Charter, Pakistan can raise this issue in front of Security Council. Because why? Because this issue deals with the international peace and security. The lives of millions of people are being jeopardized just because of this decision taken by the government who doesn't agree with Pakistan on any issue. And the second part is that, which is so alarming, that they are not agreeing on sitting on any issue to discuss with Pakistan. So I really believe that this issue must raise in the Security Council, and even that can go into the General Assembly. So that's one of the other aspects which Pakistan can do in the United Nations. Finally, I've been asked that the civil society, I think the civil society even in Pakistan and even in India, both countries have a very strong diaspora in America. I think they have to convince the United States, which have to intervene in this humanitarian issue. But this is very unfortunate that every time, whenever Pakistan have asked India to speak on any issue, on any behalf, or even on the water, India is not ready to even speak with Pakistan. What is this unilateralism of expansionism in the South Asian region, that you are not ready to talk with a country whose lives are under threat, not just because of flooding, just because of the livelihood of the people in the future. So I really believe that the civil society is very strong in this country. Both diasporas have to come forward, and they need to convince all the forums in America to let those two countries to sit and resolve this issue, so that the people living in both sides have to have a comfortable living. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks. You have reminded us that the abeyance of cooperation in water sharing is not a legal pause, but a humanitarian crisis. Right to water denied is indeed humanity denied itself. Our last panelist is Shahmeer Halepota, who is an attorney and a partner at AZA Law. Shahmeer holds a JD from University of California, Berkeley School of Law with a certificate of specialization in international law. He was awarded the Best Oral Argument Award and the American Jurisprudence Award in Refugee Law, as well as Prosser Prizes in Constitutional Law, International Law, and Mediation for Litigators. He also served as senior editor of the Berkeley Journal of Middle Eastern and Islamic Law. Mr. Shahmeer, I would like to ask from you a critical question that is of prime importance. How can Indus Water Treaty be preserved and revitalized in the face of emerging geopolitical challenges? You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator and Mala, for organizing such an important event. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends, colleagues, for over 60 years, the 1960 Indus Water Treaty has stood as South Asia's most durable example of rules over rivalry. It has been applauded as an exemplar of resource diplomacy, having survived 3 wars in one of the world's most volatile regions. My comments today will focus on 4 subparts. The first will be the context of which the Indus Waters Treaty arose. The second will be the dispute resolution mechanism of the Indus Waters Treaty. The third will be an analysis of how that dispute resolution system has worked in practice. And the fourth will be recommendations on how the Indus Waters Treaties can be modernized in lieu of the current abeyance. So in terms of context, issues over water rights existed pre-partition, including the 1935 Anderson Commission and the 1941 Robb Commission. Shortly after partition, there was a series of temporary treaties which ended on March 31st, 1948, when the water resources from the East Punjab were cut off and diplomacy at the highest level between Liaquat Ali Khan and Nehru were required to address that issue. Following those temporary treaties, you had the Delhi Agreement, which was a mechanism to address issues but had no formal resolution system. In that context, in the 1950s, the World Bank stepped in to serve as a moderator for these disputes in exchange for financial resources to both India and Pakistan. And as a result, we have what is the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty. And under the treaty, the dispute resolution mechanism is very robust. Initially, there's a permanent Indus Commission where both India and Pakistan appoint a commissioner who are to discuss disagreements or what are called questions. If they're unable to resolve their disagreements, then there's a 2-tier system. The first tier is a neutral expert who under Annex F has jurisdiction over 23 delineated topics which are mostly technical issues. Concurrently, there's a permanent court of arbitration who has jurisdiction over legal and all other issues. Now, we've seen these mechanisms at work in place and before. For example, the neutral expert was appointed to address the Baghliar Dam, while the permanent court of arbitration was appointed to address the Kishinganga arbitration. So, what are the issues we're seeing? There are primarily three. One is the amount of time it takes to resolve these issues. So, for example, in the first dispute over the Baghliar Dam, the designs were shared in 1992. The issue wasn't resolved by the neutral expert until 2007, 15 years. In terms of Kishinganga, Pakistan launched its objection in 1988. It took over 20 years to have that dispute resolved. And what are we seeing? India is continuing to construct dams during this entire period. So at the point where you do have a decision, it's too little, too late because of the investment that's already been made. And you have arbitrators who are hesitant to make a decision to stop the construction or revert it back to its original place. Moreover, as the barrister mentioned, in the latest dispute over Rattle, Pakistan raised the issue in August 2016 and requested the appointment of a permanent court of arbitration, versus India 1 month later required a neutral expert to weigh in on the issue. The World Bank stood silent for 5 years, and what do we have in 2003? Both the neutral expert and the permanent court of arbitration saying we both have jurisdiction over this dispute, which could lead to inconsistent rulings and inefficiencies. So how do we resolve these issues? I think there are three primary mechanisms. The first, the barrister addressed this, we need the World Bank to play a more prominent role. They are actually a third signatory on the treaty and have been in that position since 1960. India is scheduled to get $156 billion of future funding from the World Bank. The World Bank can demand compliance through various reporting mechanisms, data mechanisms, ensure that that funding is actually tied to compliance with international obligations. The second, the UN Security Council can refer the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion about whether an abeyance, specifically a unilateral abeyance, is lawful under the Indus Waters Treaty. It is likely that the International Court of Justice will be very skeptical about this, because in 1997 they issued a ruling saying that the dispute between Hungary and Slovakia and a temporary cessation of waterway treaties was not lawful. The second mechanism, the last mechanism we can see is modernizing the actual dispute resolution practice through procedural mechanisms that we see in modern day arbitrations. So once again, this is a treaty from 1960, and for that time, it had robust dispute resolution mechanisms, but in the last 60 years, those have evolved in modern day arbitrations. And there are three specific items that we can see implemented in the Indus Waters Treaty. First is adoption of rules such as ICSID or UNCENTRAL, which were actually used by the neutral expert in deciding his rule. You can have a pool of emergency arbitrators that both sides can agree on in order to put in temporary measures so that dam construction is halted as these decisions are made, and there are not the economic and ecological consequences on the lower riparian. And finally, we need to change the jurisdictional mechanism where jurisdiction lies only with one body. For example, the jurisdiction for the Indus Waters Treaty can be compartmentalized to one permanent court of arbitration who can then appoint a neutral if need be, rather than two differing bodies who hold that concurrent jurisdiction as we see in the Rattle dispute. These mechanisms will ensure that unilateral hydrohegemony is not practiced by other parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahmeer, for your insightful remarks and valuable suggestion. Indeed, preserving the Indus Treaty is not just about saving a pact. It is about saving peace and prosperity of the region itself. Thank you to all our panelists for their deeply enriching and thought-provoking perspectives. Now we open the floor for questions and answers. I will request participants to introduce themselves and be brief in their intervention and only ask one question so that we can give opportunity to more participants for asking questions from the panelists. We will take 3-4 questions in one round and the panelists will respond, and if we have time, we'll go for another round. So the floor is open.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Raja Razak, President of Pakistani American think tank. We've been hearing many threats from Indian military generals, retired military generals, that they will use water as a weapon against Pakistan. Is there anybody, United Nations or any other organization will take any action? Because whatever Indians say, they always kind of, they've done it. Like if we talk about Balochistan, Indian National Security Advisor threatened Pakistan that they will use terrorism against Pakistan, and they've been doing it. Now they are threatening to use water as a weapon. Is there anybody who will not take any action? And I'm going to add one more to climate change. Pakistan is facing devastating.
Please, one question. One, thank you. Trust the law. And please, everybody be brief. Yeah, next question.
Hello.
One question we will come there.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Sure. Please take the question.
Is that me?
Yes,
Thank you.
please take the question.
Fine, I heard all these 3 presentations, quite effective, quite, legitimizing the Pakistani claims. But on the other hand, whatever has been suggested by the one speaker or the other speaker, they are long term. And here is Pakistan with devastated flood effects and destruction and abuse of water as a weapon by Indians. And so what is the immediate solution? Is there any other method? Because United Nations Security Council has not been effective in Gaza, in so many other things, they are failing. So it's a failing institution as far as the UNC is concerned. And World Bank under Banga has not been able to play any role. So where Pakistan can go as a victim and as a lower riparian for its rights? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. One more question.
I can go?
Or maybe 2?
Press the button.
Yeah, press.
You working?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I think I was just hearing from the panelists.
Please introduce yourself first.
Introduce
Introduce yourself first.
My name is Badr Bhatti. I'm NLA Engineering University's Alumni Association board member here in Tri-State area. My question is, considering the situation today, political, economical, and social, and whatever happening in the Middle East, first of all, the human rights, it become a very weak word. It seems that the human rights does not exist in today's world. The other thing is, in litigation process, it takes so long that you cannot solve the problem with the litigation, because as you said, it took 16 years and 20 years. My question is, without having a political weight, because this is more political than economical or the technical engineering question. It's more of political weight. Unless we have the political weight, which is in our favor through Security Council or through other means, we cannot resolve this problem. My question is, how Pakistan can garner a political weight from the Security Council members or from the European Union or for other entities that we can resolve this problem? How we can garner the political weight to resolve this issue?
Thank you for your question. One more question and then we go to our panelists.
All right. So my name is Mohsin Zaheer. I'm with the Urdu News. My question is, Pakistan repeatedly saying that Indus Water treaty suspension will be considered as an act of war. So my question is, how much world community is sharing Pakistan concern, and on this occasion of UN General Assembly session, what measures needs to be taken to let the world community know how serious this problem is?
Thank you for your question. We go back to our panelists. Maybe some questions specifically related to the General Assembly and Security Council. Ambassador Usman Jadmin can respond, and then panelists can also add whatever they wish to add.
Do you want me to go
Yes,
first?
yes.
Thank you very much, everyone, for, first of all, a big thanks to the panelists, very distinguished panelists, very enriching, very valuable inputs and insights. You have expounded in detail on the historical dimension, the legalities, the technicalities, also the humanitarian dimensions, in drawn attention to all facets of this issue. So it was a very enriching discussion. Thank you very much for that. The frustration that is quite palpable in the room by Pakistani citizens especially regarding the abrogation of the treaty or this unilateral suspension of the treaty is very understandable. It's the entire government of Pakistan. State of Pakistan feels this because, like our ambassador said in the beginning, it affects our lives and livelihoods, it affects our agriculture system, food productivity, it also affects peace and security. So it has multiple dimensions, and none of this is lost on your country's officialdom. Now, what can be done to address this? The first thing to understand, and I think it was quite clear in the remarks of the panelists too, is that this unilateral suspension or holding in abeyance is null and void. It is ab initio. It has no standing. You cannot, no single party to the treaty can unilaterally abrogate the treaty or hold it in so-called abeyance. So it has no legal standing. So we do not recognize it. So it has, in legal terms, it doesn't stand. Then there is the issue of an arbitration or a judicial process already going on, which very recently announced an award saying we proceed, and for them too, the treaty holds the dispute resolution mechanism is valid, it's applicable. So that is also going on. In the international opinion also, there is clearly no support for any sort of unilateral action by one of the parties. What concretely can be done? First, let me come to the Security Council. The Security Council is the primary body responsible in the United Nations for maintaining international peace and security. At the moment, Pakistan has raised this issue in the Security Council, but not invoking it as a direct cause for, let's say, outbreak of hostilities or some sort of direct imminent threat to peace and security. But we follow this very, very closely and are preparing ourselves to do so at the right moment. And then currently we have an advantage being a non-permanent member of the Security Council to pursue this line of action more strongly, more resolutely. The General Assembly has many platforms available to raise this issue, which we do very effectively, very efficiently. There's the humanitarian dimension which we utilize, there's the human rights dimension which we utilize, and then there's also this whole debate about water itself, water sharing. There's a 2026 UN Water Conference coming up in Abu Dhabi, where we are also engaged in the preparatory process. The aim of Pakistan is to preserve the treaty. to uphold it. If you heard our permanent representative's remarks, he did not say that we want to abrogate the treaty or replace the treaty. It was all about maintaining it and reaffirming our desire to engage with the other party and to make it work. There were also very valuable suggestions here about seeking an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice, for instance, which we will also examine very carefully. So all of this is work in progress. We have taken very good note of the very valuable suggestions that arose from here too. We'll relate them to Islamabad, to our capital. We'll also pursue them here. So I assure you all of this work is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood and other panelists. Anyone
Yeah, let
of
me
them?
add.
Sure.
Thank you. I think when the disputes are to be resolved cooperatively, there has been huge success. There are two cases, Salala in 70s. It was left to the commission, it was resolved. Buller barrage issue was resolved very well in that manner and very quickly. So the mechanism in the treaty, I think, are the best example. They don't exist anywhere else. So those two cases were resolved by commission. Then it went to Baglayar, went to the arbitration, and it was addressed. It took time, but it was addressed, and it had unprecedented decision. And similar the case for the Kishanganga. Now there is a somehow assumption that not following the treaty has a one-sided cost. It's not true. If treaty is not followed, there's a cost on both sides of the border, because treaty is a easy way which both technical parties found to share the water. It doesn't deny the principle that there is a riparian river which has to be shared, and the way of sharing is defined in the treaty is easiest for both countries to do. So it's not a one-sided cost, it's a cost on both sides if treaty is not followed in that manner. I think Kishor also reflected on that. It has impact on both sides. So somehow the international diplomacy or institution should follow on working on the preserving the treaty, which is the main discussion at this time, and it has benefits of the population of Indus Basin. It doesn't matter whether they are in India or whether they are in Pakistan.
Thank you. Any other panelists would like to comment? Sure.
Thank you. I think, I agree with the response fully already, so I do not have much to say, but I would like to simply add the following. Look, the question is whether or not Pakistan can seek enforcement of international support in a case where one party is effectively rejecting a process that exists already. My answer to the question is that there is a treaty which I really believe in the details that have been included in some gentlemen have already talked about it, so I'm not going to repeat. It has a good mechanism of dispute resolution, dispute settlement. It's very detailed. Indus Treaty is one of the treaties which has such an elaborate dispute settlement mechanism that has to be used. Now the question is, what happens if one party completely ignores that and one party wants to do it? Unfortunately, from an international law perspective, it is very difficult because the treaty has to be logically abided by. That is why Pacta sunt servanda exists. That is what international general principles of international law say. If one party does not, there is no police force. It's for these kinds of things, there is no police force. So what are the choices? Diplomacy, putting pressure, dissemination, securing, garnering support from as broad as possible international community. So these are the things that probably can be done. But beyond that, it's very difficult. It's two-party, they have to abide by it. And there is a very good mechanism in the treaty itself. If both parties agree to it, no issue would be left unresolved.
thank you for your valuable comments. Can we have a second round of questions? All those who want to ask a question.
Good evening, everyone, and salam alaikum. Khalid Lul here. I'm with Mala. I manage their Interfaith Dialogue and Peace Building Initiative. I have a question related to technology and innovation. Are there global best practices in water diplomacy or conservation that Pakistan could replicate, perhaps from regions like the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Maha Khan. I live in New Jersey and I'm an engineer by profession. Just like India is upper riparian to Pakistan, I believe China is also upper riparian to India for Brahmaputra and Indus. As one of the participants said, we need short-term solutions. Anything that we talk about long-term is not the need right now, it's the immediate need for Pakistan. So I think Pakistan needs to do parallel efforts working with China and pleading its case in the UN and using its alliance with China to help solve this issue, because China has a lot of clout being an upper riparian as their status for India. So is there any effort being done unilaterally with China to solve this issue?
Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Mohammed Ahmad and I represent Global Peace Chain. Thank you, Ambassador Jadoon, for sharing the highlights on Pakistan's commitments to preserve inter-foreign treaty. And I believe that Pakistan has always been playing a very responsible role to abide international law. In my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this treaty issue came into record after Pakistan's recent episode in India, when India had the embarrassment, fortunately, while going for the adventure. That issue was sorted by the President Trump in the White House. So don't you think that it will be appropriate for Pakistan to bring that certain issue to White House again, that really thinks that really could be a reasonable solution house?
We have two more questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
My name is Naeem Katri. I am APTAC. Thank you, Ma, for inviting APTAC team for this informative lecture on Pakistan water crisis. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Zero Toklam. I study international law and serve as Executive Director of Chairwoman. My question to Pakistan are, for all panelists talk about how long this process has been going on in the international community. There is no common ground to it. Is that?
Hayden, first, thank you to Mala and for all our panelists on a very important discussion and really laying out the foundation of the history and context and where we are at today. I believe one of the panelists mentioned that the treaty does have quite an effective dispute resolution mechanism if both parties agree to it. However, I think that is a bit contradictory because one party is not agreeing to it, so it's not as effective as it could be. And so my question is, what are the implications under international law if India attempts to unilaterally suspend or withdraw from the treaty? Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
To address the question about other international water frameworks, I think there's a successful 1996 treaty between India and Nepal, the Maha Khan, where that treaty has a much better cooperative arrangement in terms of sharing data information as well as financial splitting of resources to create future projects. I don't think it has as strong of a dispute resolution mechanism. So what I think is the shining portion of the Indus Waters Treaty is the dispute resolution mechanism. There are, I think Article 6 addresses future cooperation. I think what it could borrow or strengthen, as I said, is refined techniques for updated arbitration models, but also additional data sharing. So for example, often Pakistan is unable to lodge objections to projects because India only informs it years later after the project is well into development. So those, that honesty, transparency, and informational parity are efforts that can be duplicated in the Indus Waters Treaty in my part.
Thank you, Shahmeer, for the response. Barrister Dawood, would you like to respond to?
I would like to go back on my argument again, and I would add that this issue must not be politicized. I mean, water is something which is a basic need of every human being. How a country can use water as a diplomacy tool, that's the first thing, as a huge violation as a country. So I believe that the World Bank, back again, because of the originator. I mean, think about an institution which is internationally recognized and have been spending 8 years for having such treaty. I think both countries, even they agree or not, World Bank itself can take an initiative as a facilitator and as a guarantor of the treaty that the basic human life is under threat. It's not a matter of politicizing the issue. So I think the World Bank has a larger role to play in the coming months rather than any other forum which I could see. If it becomes a more stronger international peace and security issue, then obviously Pakistan Council can handle it. But I believe at this point, World Bank have more role to play than this one.
Any other panelists would like to respond to that?
I think there was a question about technology. It is happening on both sides. In India and Pakistan, both they are introducing drip irrigation. We have done projects in Punjab which do that. So technology is there, and technology does help because it reduces the project. My sense of having done, also I worked on the treaty between Bangladesh and India. I still am hopeful that in the long run sense will prevail. We have several issues which got resolved, Baglayar and others. Yeah, it takes time, but I mean, effort should be made, no doubt about it, but I think in the longer run the sense will prevail because it's not a one-sided issue as I'm telling you. It's a both-side issue. The development on eastern Punjab is not feasible also if there is a disagreement on the water sharing. That's both sides there. So I think awareness sessions like this and meetings are important, they play a good role. And when the cooperation is done, the issue is resolved much faster than when the dispute is. So one way is probably to do more of the discussion at level. When we were trying to do a treaty between Bangladesh and India, at that time originally there was governments were not starting it, and there was something we call second track, which was academicians and others, people who are interested in technical issues. They started the dialogue, and then 96 agreement happened afterwards. So that is another way of continuing to discuss some of this, while the ambassador and others are dealing directly with the more straightforward things. So I think the sessions which are technical, they can debate about it and highlight. That could be a way to do it. Thank you.
Any comments from the other panelists? So can we take maybe 2 or 3 more questions?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Thank you so much for organizing this event. I work for New York City government as a commissioner to racial equity. As well, I serve in New York State Assembly as a senior advisor. So my question to our Pakistani government is that do we understand that without the support of American government, nothing can be done? As we have seen in past 60, 70 years, that no matter is resolved with the help of United Nations. So do we have any lobbyist group hired or trained to work to support to protect the future of Pakistani people? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One more question.
One more question? Yes.
What I'm about to say is a little different. I've worked in nonprofit. I have formerly worked as a volunteer with former President Clinton, and I have worked in the arts. I've worked along every stakeholdership you can imagine. This is my question. Each and every one of you are a human being in here, okay? We've got the Ukraine going on with Russia. We've got Israel going on with Gaza. We have got Rwanda going on with the DRC. There is an issue going on everywhere. And sorry to say this to you, sir, I've been here since 1998. Without this building and the people in it, there would be wars breaking out with every person, every human being on this planet. So the UN is here to resolve, not to solve. So that's what we need to understand. And when I sit here and I listen, I love India and I love Pakistan equally. I love your food, your culture, your art. But water is a universal right, and food is a universal right. I'm not speaking here as an NGO. I have the background of every stakeholdership you can imagine. And sometimes when the NGOs come in, we're looked down upon here. Sometimes the permanent representatives are here. We're human beings at the end of the day. First, governments deal politically, yes, but you're sitting in your seats as human beings with family. So we need to stop fighting here about water. And really, India, Pakistan, with all due respect, come together, because you need to drink water every day. And you need to eat food every day. And I don't care if you make Elon Musk money, or you make $2 in the village, you need water to eat and drink. You need food to eat and drink. So
To the follow-up questions?
No, I think it's done.
Okay. Anyone, any of the panelists would like to respond to the questions and comments?
I'm happy to address that question. I think that question dovetails nice to Ms. Mohideen's question, which is, of course, in the context of what's occurring, everyone's hoping for an amicable resolution. But an amicable resolution requires the opposite party to be willing to talk. And if one party is unilaterally declaring an abeyance in clear violation of international law, then one must recognize the disparity in negotiating positions and willingness. I think when you address that on the front end, then there's plenty of room for an amicable resolution on the back end.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shahmeer. Any other panelists would like to comment? So thank you for a very interesting round of questions and covering different aspects of the treaty itself and the legal, political, and economic and humanitarian implications of it. Now I would like to request our panelists for brief concluding remarks. You have 2 minutes each. We'll start with Dr. Kishor. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. In my presentation, I focused on international law and treaty law, and I continue to the same thing. And in the beginning of my presentation, I said that I was a firm believer of a treaty which has been designed to serve cooperation. Treaties are, law, this is a treaty. International water law is something that encourages cooperation. One has to believe in cooperation, no conflict.
As I said earlier, it was 8 years of discussion, and actually what finally happened was written up by an advisor in the World Bank. His name was General Wheeler. He was an engineer. So I think, and both parties accepted this division of that. The way the division of water or sharing is done is beautiful. It works. And yeah, there are some issues which came into being. Unlike many other riparian rivers where there's a daily issue, that kind of issue doesn't arrive in it. As I said, I think we should keep hope. I am still positive that the sense will prevail in the longer run because the cost is on both sides. It's not on one side. Somehow there is an imagination that is on both sides. In the eastern side also there is an issue if the treaty is not valid. The further development, which is the main aim of the treaty. If you look at the preamble of the treaty, it does not talk about sharing arrangement, talks about arrangement how the Indus waters can be developed. So that is the way the Indus waters can be developed. And I think this discussion was very useful in terms of highlighting that how cooperation can be done, and when it is done, the decisions are fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Masood, for highlighting that it's not just the legal cost or a legal pause. It has larger implications, and we hope too that the treaty's sanctity is safeguarded. Barrister Dawood?
Yeah, I would like to conclude that what India need to realize is that neither geographically Pakistan is going to move from that side, or neither India. Both are going to coexist. And the rivers, they're not going to change their site, they're not going to change their directions. They're going to flow on the same plains and on the same flow in the next coming generations. So rather than focusing India on this treaty, that how to suspend it or putting in abeyance, I think India need to move forward with Pakistan for the upcoming challenges which Pakistan and India both are going to face in terms of climate change and in terms of the patterns of monsoon and the melting of the glaciers in the Himalayas. These are the major issues which both countries have to deal with, rather than we are kept focusing on something which has been decided between the two countries. So I believe India have to come up with prevailing sanity and need to understand the gravity of human life and resources, and plus the atrocities which they are witnessing every day, not only in Pakistan but also in India itself.
So my family's from a village called Gandolayar, and my extended family feels the effects of the water issues we discussed today. I want to conclude by refocusing on the impact of the Indus Water Treaty on everyday lives. I think what's clear based on today's discussion is the solution to those problems can't be long-term legal mechanisms that take decades to resolve. It's got to be a multifaceted approach that requires the highest levels of diplomacy, legal action, and creative solutions so that those most affected can find resolutions and solutions in the near term.
Now I would like to request Deputy Permanent Representative Ambassador Usman Jadoon for his concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Saima. With your indulgence, I might take a bit longer. I had some prepared remarks, but I thought to conclude, I also draw attention to one more aspect. And this is because today we were focused on the Indus Waters Treaty, so we dissected the treaty in a lot of detail. But it is also important to understand that not every country in the world has treaties for water sharing. Rivers flow from one state to another, and communities live side by side, and on the basis of customary international law, many of these, one of the legal instruments was mentioned by Barrister Saab, the Water Courses Agreement. There's others. There's a European EC, European Economic Commission Convention, and they have a sort of customary international law has distilled from them with three very key important principles, which is I don't want to get them wrong. One is equitable and responsible utilization. The second is the no harm principle. You do not harm the waters which are going into the lower riparian, and you also cooperate. There's a duty to cooperate for sharing information and data. Even if there was no Indus Waters Treaty, the upper riparian, in this case India, is legally bound to do all of this, to use the waters equitably and reasonably, to not cause any harm to the river flows, and to cooperate with us, with the other riparians, for sharing information and data. What happened in the Indus Waters Treaty was Pakistan gave up its rights on three rivers, and Masood will bear me out. If, let's say, there was no treaty, we had rights over all six rivers.
Exactly, that's the way.
This is something we need to understand. So if India walks out of the Indus Waters Treaty, it does not mean it is absolved of any legal or any moral or ethical or obligation to simply stop, impede, divert the flow of waters, or in rainy seasons like we are currently witnessing, release extra water. So, Indian position is untenable. It is untenable legally, morally, politically, in every sense of the way. And inshallah, we are hopeful sense will prevail in the court of public opinion, in the court of political opinion, and in a court of law. Wherever you take this, I don't think it's defensible. One more thing that I wanted to highlight is the efficacy of diplomacy. Sometimes diplomacy is also done out of public glare, And some of the friends that we have, some were mentioned here, China, United States, perhaps they might be nudging India privately to ask it to reverse its decision and ask it to not go ahead with this irrational and very knee-jerk kind of announcement to hold the treaty in abeyance. It might not be in public domain or public way. I am pretty sure these kind of engagements must be taking place because this position is indefensible. Pakistan remains committed to preserving the treaty, upholding the treaty, and taking very restrained and responsible approach which does not do any more harm to it. If seek your indulgence for a couple of minutes more to summarize the discussion. There were 5 key takeaways from this discussion. The first is on the importance of the treaty. Came out across very clearly how much important it is for Pakistan because it's our lifeline, it's for our agriculture, for our society, for our survival. The second is on the legality. We are brilliant luminaries here, expounded in detail on the legal aspects. Nothing more I could add. You all heard, legally there is no case for India to unilaterally hold it in abeyance or to walk away from the dispute resolution mechanisms. The third was the humanitarian dimension. If water is impeded or extra water is released, real people on the ground get hurt, suffer, and lose their lives, their livelihoods. So, it simply has a very strong humanitarian case, if no other. Fourth is on the action to be required by other stakeholders such as United Nations, World Bank, and civil society. Again, very, very useful ideas were generated, and we took very good note of them. All of them have a role. UN has its own role, World Bank has its own role, I mentioned it, and civil society, people like you, right? If only, ma'am, there were more people like you speaking the way you did with the passion and the clarity and the conviction into all these issues. Lastly, it was the peace and security dimension. This is something us diplomats look at very carefully because this treaty has the potential, abrogation of the treaty or wrong or implementation of the treaty has the potential to upend regional stability and cause friction and tensions between India and Pakistan, which may lead to a cause of serious conflict, kinetic conflict. And someone here also mentioned the statement by the National Security Committee of Pakistan, chaired by the Prime Minister, that any impeding of flow of the Indus River system will be seen as an act of war by Pakistan. We don't want this. We are a peace-loving nation. We want this region to thrive and not go to war. So our commitment to international law is unwavering. We will continue to uphold the principles of law and engage constructively for water governance. But once again, like Dr. Kishor said, we cannot do this alone. We need a willing partner to tango and to ensure that the treaty is respected and all the humanitarian obligations are met and peace and stability in South Asia are preserved. Lastly, I thank you all most sincerely once again for your presence and very, very valuable contributions to the panelists and to the very distinguished participants, remarkable questions and engagement. It was a pleasure for the permanent mission to partner with Mala and in both the organization and conduct of this event. Thank you very much, ma'am. And we look forward to further such collaborations. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ambassador Ghazanavi, for firstly highlighting that no country can run away from its customary international law obligations regardless of a treaty or no treaty, and summing up very eloquently the entire discussion. On behalf of the organizers, Permanent Mission of Pakistan and Mala, I extend sincere thanks to our distinguished panelists and to each one of you for joining us today. Let us close today's event with this thought: water is life, and life cannot be held in abeyance. Water must never be weaponized, treaties must never be trivialized, and peace must never be compromised. the Indus must remain what it was always meant to be, a river of life, not a river of discord. Thank you to you all for joining us.